Have you ever noticed a strange pattern? The more kindness you show, the less respect you receive in return? It's as if your attempts to please others only provoke their neglect, tests, and even exploitation. While it might be hard to put into words, the feeling of discomfort is familiar to many. The tension of holding back a sharp retort, the bitterness of realizing your opinion is ignored, and finally, the frustration that manipulative, cold, or even cruel people command respect, while your peaceful intentions are constantly trampled. But what if this isn't just a coincidence, but a hidden logic? A logic that might be unpleasant and dark, yet true. Over 500 years ago, Machiavelli asserted that if one must choose between being loved and being feared, it is far safer to be feared. And while this sounds cynical, the reality is that the modern world often responds more sharply to displays of strength than to kindness. This isn't due to inherent human malevolence, but rather how the human mind is wired. It tends to respect clear boundaries, not empty promises, to admire power, not unconditional submission. This isn't about becoming a despot, a puppeteer, or a self-absorbed egoist. The goal is far deeper, the realization that simply being good isn't enough. Kindness, unsupported by the ability to assert one's interests, is like bleeding in the ocean, sooner or later attracting predators. Perhaps you, the reader, are at such a point, weary of being ignored, overgiving, and feeling insignificant. You might be asking, how do I earn respect without becoming someone I despise? How do I gain strength without losing my true self? This text aims to dispel the misconception that kindness alone suffices. It will delve into the psychological aspects of fear, respect, and authority. Drawing on Machiavelli's ideas, it will show how to make your presence significant and prevent being ignored. In the real world, those who fail to set boundaries risk being pushed aside. If you are ready to face the truth and understand why you are treated the way you are, you should continue reading. What follows could fundamentally change your standing in society. Human society is structured such that genuine kindness, devoid of external strength, rarely receives due recognition. Respect is not earned by virtue itself, but by the potential it holds when backed by power. A common misconception is the naive belief that good intentions alone are enough, as if politeness, compassion, conflict avoidance, and self-sacrifice automatically confer value in the eyes of others. However, human psychology is far more complex. Respect does not arise from a simple desire to do good. It stems from the perception of authority. And authority, in turn, is formed through confident demeanor, firmness of character, and, undoubtedly, a certain degree of awe. Numerous psychological studies confirm that fear is a powerful stimulus that commands attention. When an individual sets clear boundaries, speaks with conviction, and unhesitatingly exits unpleasant or offensive situations, they transmit a clear and unambiguous signal: you cannot treat me this way. The minds of those around them perceive this as an impenetrable barrier, a territory fenced with an electric wire, not to be entered without extreme caution. Consider the opposite situation. People who agree when they truly want to say no, offer excessive explanations, smile to avoid conflict, and remain silent to keep the peace. In the eyes of an observer, such a person radiates not confidence and security, but rather permissiveness. And where permissiveness reigns, abuse inevitably arises. Fear and respect are connected by an invisible yet strong thread. This isn't about direct threats, shouting, or aggressive behavior, which often mask weakness. True psychological strength manifests in self-control, in firm silence, in a gaze that needs no justification, in a simple and confident no, uttered without a tremor in the voice. Niccolò Machiavelli certainly did not advocate for senseless cruelty among rulers. He drew attention to an immutable truth of human nature. People tend to forget the good deeds done for them, but they never forget those who made them doubt their impunity. This observation holds true not only for political leaders, but for each of us in our workplaces, friendships, and personal lives. Those who ignore this pattern squander their energy in futile attempts to please everyone, yet never earn respect. Perhaps a natural question arises: is being kind a mistake? Absolutely not. But there is a complex dilemma that must be considered. We will discuss one of the sharpest internal conflicts people face: the dilemma of kindness. How do you recognize the moment when kindness transforms into weakness? And what do you do when it becomes clear that others are exploiting your fairness? Prepare to look in the mirror and face the truth. This truth may be painful, but it will also bring liberation. Perhaps no one has ever told you this directly. Perhaps you were instilled from childhood with the belief that being a good person is enough, that showing empathy, helping when possible, and putting others' interests before your own would ensure the world repays you in kind. However, reality cruelly differs from these idealistic notions. In the real world, kindness devoid of common sense and caution becomes bait. And predators, who undoubtedly exist in our society, unerringly sense this weakness, just as a dog picks up the scent of fear. Within the fabric of human existence lies a harsh and relentless dilemma. The more sincere a person's pursuit of virtue, the more vulnerable they become to life's challenges. This vulnerability, like a corrosive acid, penetrates the deepest reaches of the soul, giving rise to agonizing questions. Is the root of the problem within oneself? Is one's kindness excessive? And if one abandons this kindness, will they betray their true essence? It is at this moment that many find themselves trapped in doubt, fearing that hardening their heart will defile their soul. However, as an unwritten truth dictates, genuine kindness cannot exist without strength. Kindness, devoid of the ability to self-protect, to set boundaries, and to recognize exploitation, ceases to be a virtue and transforms into naivety. This naivety becomes a psychological trap designed to keep good people in the role of emotional servants. This trap is called validation dependency. One becomes accustomed to being accommodating, a careful listener, showing understanding, and forgiving even those who do not deserve forgiveness. Peacefulness is mistakenly taken for passivity, and gradually, one becomes consumed by unbalanced relationships where only they make concessions, sacrifices, and show care. In psychology, this phenomenon is known as self-abnegation, an emotional surrender of oneself to maintain the image of a good, pleasant, and beloved person. However, the price of such self-abnegation is extraordinarily high. One loses the respect of others, but even more tragically, they lose self-respect. It is crucial to understand that kindness is not synonymous with weakness. However, kindness devoid of wisdom and discernment becomes the shortest path to suffering and disappointment. As Machiavelli keenly understood, the essence is not to encourage cruelty, but to grasp the depths of human nature. Human nature is such that it bows before those capable of standing up for themselves. However, a natural question arises. How can one achieve this ability without crossing moral boundaries? How can one earn respect, perhaps even inspire awe, without inciting widespread hatred or becoming what one most despises? This very question will be the subject of further discussion. Who was Machiavelli, and why might he be the very mentor who can help us learn to protect ourselves without losing our essence? Niccolò Machiavelli was an indefatigable observer of human nature, living in an era of political intrigue, civil wars, corrupt courts, and treacherous allies. He witnessed firsthand what many still refuse to acknowledge. Power resides not in the hands of the righteous, but in the hands of astute strategists. It was from this harsh reality that his famous treatise, The Prince, was born. A book that evokes hatred in some and admiration in others, but which only fools can ignore. Contrary to popular belief, Machiavelli was not a monster. He was, above all, a radical realist. While other authors debated what rulers should be, he described them as they actually are. He understood that in a world governed by self-interest, naive idealism is doomed to fail. Power and influence, whether at the state level or in personal life, demand a deep understanding of human nature and motivations. When Niccolò Machiavelli asserted that inspiring fear is sometimes more effective than love, he was not advocating for senseless cruelty. His point was that the love others feel is often fickle and conditional on benefit. People tend to love those who bring them advantage or meet their interests, but this love can quickly vanish when disagreements arise or demands are refused. Fear, when skillfully applied, can create clear boundaries. It forms a kind of respectful limit, an invisible barrier that prevents abuse, manipulation, and betrayal. Machiavelli viewed fear not as a tool of destruction, but as a means of protection. A leader who does not inspire fear will sooner or later face betrayal, because the absence of fear leads to a loss of vigilance, which, in turn, provokes people to exhibit their worst qualities. At the same time, the thinker warned against abusing fear. A ruler who is only feared but hated risks provoking rebellion. True strength lies in the ability to command respect, built on a subtle combination of firmness, strategic thinking, and self-control. Machiavelli advocated for deliberate strictness, not unbridled cruelty. A leader blinded by hatred loses control of the situation. A skillful strategist, on the other hand, artfully uses fear to keep those around them on edge, preventing them from underestimating themselves. It's time for self-reflection. Consider who you are in this world, the master of your destiny or a puppet in someone else's hands. Do you set the rules of the game? Or do you merely react to others' moves until your patience runs out? The answer lies in how you present yourself. This is what we will discuss next: how to inspire due respect without causing animosity. How to create an aura of unshakable authority so that people think thrice before showing disrespect, not through shouting and threats, but because your very presence commands silence. In the next chapter, we will delve into the depths of the true art of wielding power. Stay with us, because this is where fundamental shifts in the understanding of strength occur. There is a colossal difference between inspiring fear and being an object of hatred. If you cannot balance on this fine line, you risk falling into one of two extremes that destroy any power dynamic: passivity, which invites abuse, or tyranny, which breeds rebellion. True authority is an art of balance, an art mastered by few. To inspire fear does not mean to be aggressive. It does not imply cruelty, shouting, humiliation, or control through constant intimidation. That is not respect, that is terror. And terror always has an expiration date. Sooner or later, it turns against those who imposed it. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote that a ruler must avoid hatred at all costs, for hatred is a silent poison. People can endure fear, but they will not tolerate humiliation. The key to lasting authority lies in the ability to command due respect, ensuring no one violates established boundaries, while simultaneously being fair, so as not to provoke hidden resentment. How is this achieved? One must act decisively, confidently, and consistently. You should make it clear to others, without superfluous words, that disrespect will come at a cost, that every word matters, your absence is felt, and your presence is valuable. Such an attitude is formed gradually, starting with small steps: a firm refusal, disengaging from negative conversations, offering no excuses or repetitions for those who intentionally test boundaries. It's crucial to defend your emotional space and demonstrate through your actions that another's will shall not dictate your behavior. Psychology confirms that people who possess power but do not resort to open confrontation ultimately command greater respect. This is the so-called hidden strength, which is felt even when not actively applied. It is what makes others carefully weigh their actions, not out of fear, but out of an understanding that disrespect will not go unpunished. This is the secret: to inspire, if not fear, then respect, by showing that what is under control is not your surroundings, but your own self. People who demonstrate composure and confidence in managing their emotions, behavior, and personal boundaries earn greater recognition than those who resort to shouting or threats. However, what if these efforts are insufficient? What if, despite striving for self-assertion, one still feels used, tested, or ignored? In such cases, we enter the delicate territory of psychology, into the personal space where patterns of submission, fear of conflict, and difficulties in setting clear boundaries are formed. In further analysis, we will delve deeper into how the inner world and emotional experiences can hinder deserved respect, and, more importantly, how to break this vicious cycle and begin to form a new, stronger, and more confident personality. Recognizing the importance of respect, firmness, and a moderate degree of awe is merely the first step. It is necessary to look within oneself, as intellectual understanding alone is insufficient. If, deep down, there remains a fear of disturbing others, disappointing them, or being rejected for expressing one's own stance, then the root of the problem lies within. And it is there that the potential for true transformation resides. Many people learn a behavior pattern from an early age aimed at pleasing others for survival. From childhood, sometimes subtly, they were taught that love could only be earned through good behavior. They learned that refusal was considered selfishness, objection was impolite, and disagreement led to emotional punishment. As a result, in adulthood, they strive desperately to please, prefer silence to maintain peace, and settle for less than they deserve, fearing that setting boundaries will lead to a loss of love. This is an insidious psychological poison, an unconscious script that subtly transforms a person into an emotional slave, depriving them of free will and the ability to self-express. The most tragic aspect is that the more often an individual reproduces this destructive behavior pattern, the deeper it becomes rooted in their subconscious, like the roots of an old tree entangling everything around it. Every yes uttered in a situation where the heart demands no becomes a signal to the outside world that one's own opinion and desires do not matter. Every avoidance of conflict, dictated by fear or reluctance to rock the boat, only contributes to the proliferation of injustice and encourages impunity. Every forgiveness granted without sincere remorse from the offender merely confirms their right to abuse and undermines belief in fairness. The key here is the realization that respect begins with self-respect. It is impossible to gain external authority without inner firmness and confidence in one's own worth. One cannot inspire respect in others if they do not feel it for themselves. They cannot set personal boundaries and protect their interests if they do not believe they deserve protection and dignified treatment. And finally, no one will take them seriously if they constantly doubt their own significance and righteousness. The process of building a new, self-assured personality begins with small but important decisions. One must learn to notice moments when they fall silent out of fear, when they belittle themselves to fit into someone else's company, when they feel obligated to play a role that does not align with their true essence. These situations, like links in a chain, must be systematically dismantled, acting not with anger and aggression, but with strategic thinking, presence of mind, and an unwavering belief in one's own truth. Be prepared that as soon as you begin to assert yourself and defend your interests, it will cause dissatisfaction amongst some people in your circle. They may accuse you of being rude, cold, arrogant, and other faults. However, in reality, the problem is not with you, but with the fact that they no longer know how to manipulate and control you. Any change in a person's behavior aimed at strengthening their self-esteem and upholding personal boundaries destabilizes those who are accustomed to feeding on their passivity and meekness. And yes, you may lose some people along this path, but, as experience shows, losing those who only knew how to use and exploit brings long-awaited liberation and allows you to breathe freely. When one aligns with their inner truth and begins to live in accordance with their values, the external world inevitably reacts to these changes. People who previously ignored them suddenly begin to listen to their opinion. Relationships that drained their energy and brought only disappointment either dissolve or transform into healthier and more harmonious ones. One stops begging for love and attention and begins to attract respect and recognition, because they are no longer overly available and willing to do anything for others' approval. And what is not easily obtained is always valued far more. However, even with all of the above, to achieve complete harmony and success, one more crucial element is needed, which links all previous aspects together. One can be well-versed in psychology, philosophy, and behavior patterns, but they still need to answer the main question: how to balance this newfound strength without becoming what they despise most. How to maintain clarity of mind, respect for others, and honesty, even while acting with firmness and decisiveness. This question demands special attention and careful consideration. In every person's life, there comes a turning point when a choice must be made that determines the future path. On one hand, you can continue to strive for others' favor, naively believing that someday they will appreciate you. On the other hand, there is an opportunity to stop this fruitless pursuit of external approval and begin to behave with dignity, recognizing your own worth. The truth, though harsh, is simple. No one will offer what you do not demand for yourself. This is not about becoming insensitive or despotic. It's about learning to assert your interests, building invisible yet strong boundaries around yourself. You must be able to look in the eyes of those who try to manipulate, maintaining a firm silence that eloquently says, "Not with me. Not anymore." This is true strength, which needs no shouting or demonstration, but is felt in the air, in one's posture, in one's gaze. This strength is born the moment one stops striving to be loved and begins to demand respect. Niccolò Machiavelli, the perceptive thinker of the Renaissance, realized that people's love is inconstant, conditional, and full of hidden motives. Respect, on the other hand, if earned, is durable. It sustains and protects itself. This is what one should strive for, not the approval of others, but the attainment of inner sovereignty. As soon as the realization comes that simply being good is not enough, that kindness needs a sword and shield, everything changes dramatically. One does not become embittered, but gains wholeness. They give because they want to, not out of fear of losing. They love deeply, but do not allow themselves to be used. They forgive, but do not forget. They know when to leave, and therefore will never again be underestimated. The author is always interested to know in which areas of life his audience feels a need for greater confidence and assertiveness. Whether in career, family ties, or personal relationships, an invitation to share thoughts in the comments can be a starting point for valuable reflection and exchange of experience. Frank acknowledgement of one's own weaknesses and areas for growth often serves as the first step towards positive change. If the questions raised in the video resonated deeply and evoked strong emotions, it is especially important to the author that viewers do not stop there. The next installment, in his opinion, is no less significant and can serve as a logical continuation of the conversation begun. The author urges not to postpone viewing, for understanding the psychological aspects of respect is merely the starting point of a great and fascinating journey towards self-awareness.